Welcome back to LHS Learning Lounge, and today we're going to be going over the 20 most common Spanish verbs. So, the submission I was given here was Spanish for SL with the praying hands, which I understand. It was a struggle bus for a lot of people. Learning a new language is difficult, but I had to think, how do I narrow this down? And what I noticed was that the main problem I found for um, people learning Spanish, especially in the later stages, such as IB Spanish SL4, is that they didn't know the basics, right? It's so difficult to get a point across when you don't have the exact verbiage, the exact wording that you saw in English, right? One of the most helpful things I ever learned about in language learning is negotiation of meaning, right? Making yourself understood. Not always are we going to be able to transmit the message exactly that we have in English to Spanish, right? There's going to be a word we don't know, or maybe a verb that we don't know. But if we know the most common verbs, we can dance our way to that point, right? The main idea is that we transmit not the exact message, but the main point of the message, right? We don't always get all those complexities in there, but as long as we can get that main point across, we're golden, right? An IB grader isn't going to be reading your writing or listening to your IO and say, oh, I think that they phrased it like this in their head and they said it like a roundabout way here. No, they don't know what you said in your head, so negotiate that meaning. Dance around it until you get your point across. So, starting off, a verb that I think pretty much everyone knows is ser, to be, right? It's irregular. We see here with the conjugations. And the example that we're given is people introducing themselves, talking about who they are, right? Nosotras somos Carmen y Paula, right? We are Carmen and Paula. So, I see the main problem with ser and estar is that when do you use them, right? That can be a whole separate video on its own, but I'll try to give um, a very brief summary, right? We see here estar is irregular, and the example they give here is estoy muy cansado por el viaje, right? I'm very tired from the journey, right? Both of these verbs mean to be. It's difficult in the English brain because we don't have two different words for this, right? But ser is to you is talking about yourself, characteristics, professions, long-term conditions, nationalities, and what I find to be quite the curveball here is times, right? How I think about all the other ones is that this is someone that doesn't really change, right? If somebody's shy, they're shy. If somebody's a doctor, they're a doctor, right? Long term conditions, I mean, it's happening for a long time, right? Nationalities, what you're born as, you don't really change quite often, right? And that is temporary, right? Being tired, location, right? Está aquí, right? It's here. Um, and also, you see that estar is more often used, like in conjunction with other verbs, um, specifically to form the progressive tense. So that's something you'll learn about. I think you might have learned in Spanish 3. You might learn in Spanish 4. I think you at least go over it. Tener is to have, right? Yo tengo, it's once again irregular. Spanish loves to make their most common verbs irregular. This one they use vosotros, which I don't really like, but do you fancy an ice cream? Now, one thing you have to know is that tener is only to physically have, right? A lot of times people get confused there because in English we say, oh, I had fun. Do not use tener in that instance. That's a different verb that you're going to use in that instance. Again, same thing with estar and ser. To the English brain, it doesn't make sense because we don't have two different verbs for that. But you have to know that it's to physically have, right? Or in this case, it's to fancy or to feel like something, right? I have a desire for ice cream, right? Um, is what they're saying here. So it kind of helps think of it literally, even though it more translates to that do you fancy it? Do you feel like ice cream? It does literally translate to have desire, right? To physically have desire. Hacer is to do or to make. This one can get a bit confusing. You have to look into context because sometimes when you're reading something and you think of one meaning, the sentence doesn't make sense. You're like they're doing this, but that doesn't make sense. It might be that they're making something, right? So the example that they use here is hago deporte 3 veces por semana, right? I do sports 3 times a week. Excuse the accent. I apologize. I'm not a native Spanish speaker. But, as you can see, once again, it's irregular. Spanish loves their irregular verbs. Ir is to go. Once again, irregular. Really, I don't think there's much to say about ir. Just memorize the conjugations. They tend to be a bit more confusing, a bit more difficult because it's only a 2-letter word, right? It's literally the ending of some verbs. So, the example they use is Esta noche voy al cine con Maria. Tonight I'm going to the cinema with Maria. Yeah, and you often see this tense with when someone says I'm going to go, right? Um, it can be used in kind of a future tense way, very basic way of using future tense. Poder is to be able to. Um, as you can see, once again, it's irregular. Have we had one non-irregular verb on here yet? I don't think so, right? So it's literally like to be able to do something, right? Or can, right? Puedes venir a nuestra fiesta el viernes? Can you come to our party on Friday, right? Are you able to come to our party on Friday? The next one is saber. You probably had a whole lesson on this in Spanish too. Once again, it's irregular. Gotta love it. And the example they give is Usted sabe dónde está el Teatro Nacional? Do you know where the National Theater is? Sorry. This part is really small on my screen because I'm recording, so I have to keep pausing to look a little bit closer. And I don't like the way they explain it on here, but yes, saber and poder can both mean to be able to, but it's kind of in 2 different ways, right? Saber is more like to, still in most contexts, it's to know. You can replace it with to know, right? So, like in this one, ¿sabes bailar salsa? Can you dance salsa? Well, we can think of this as, do you know how to salsa? Right? So, yes, you can replace it with can in some instances, but for the most part, it's more to know. Even in this case, it's to know. Do you know how to do it? Right? It requires experience, it requires learning. Whereas the example that they use for poder, it's literally like possibility or the opportunity, right? Can you come out tonight? It's not, do you know how to come out tonight? No. You don't have to know how to do that. It doesn't require experience. Poner is to put. Once again, irregular. This one, there's not many rules. It literally is just to put, pongo el plato en la mesa. I put the plate on the table, right? Very basic. We can skip past this one to make sure to memorize it. Haber, to have or to be, right? You've used this one, I'm guessing, when you say I, right? There is, right? That is a form of haber. Once again, it's irregular. There's whole tenses based on haber. And the example they use is hemos trabajado toda la semana, right? We've worked the week. We have worked the week. Have, right? It's not to physically have in the way that tener is, right? I wouldn't use haber to say I have a dog. No, right? Would I use haber to say I have had a dog? Yes. If I have had something, right? I'd use both haber and tener. And it's an auxiliary verb, which you don't need to really know what auxiliary verb is, but it's used in combination with things, right? Really, the only time you'd use it alone is I to show the existence or availability of things, right? There is. So there's whole tenses based on haber, which I feel that you've learned before, but you will likely learn again in Spanish. IB Spanish 4. Decir, to say or to tell. Once again, it's irregular. Not much to say about this one, pretty direct. There's not many rules. Me dices la hora, por favor. Can you tell me the time, please? Right? Very basic. Querer is to want. Right? Once again, it's irregular. And the example they give is queremos viajar en diciembre a Chile. We want to go to Chile in December. Right? Pretty basic. Not much irregularity going on here. Hablar, to speak. Once again, this one is not irregular. This one's a regular verb. Woo woo! You're 12 in, and we got one irregular. We got one regular verb, And the example they use is very basic, right? Hablamos solo un poco de inglés, right? We only speak a little bit of English. You guys might need that, but replace the English with Spanish, and that'll be a good sentence for most of us. Dar is to give. Once again, it's irregular. I find that dar is a frequently forgotten verb. I don't know what it is about dar. People always forget it. Practice, practice, practice. You're going to use it more than you think you will. And the example they give is siempre doy 10% de propina. I always give a 10% tip. Sorry, I forgot the word for 10 for a second. Ver is to see or to watch. Can be used pretty interchangeably. I'm not going to use this example because they use vosotros, which you will not need to necessarily know. It's good to know when you're reading that this is vosotros form because I'm pretty sure in IB, I might be wrong, they can hit you with vosotros, right? As long as you know that it's ice and es, you'll be okay. When you're writing or speaking, you never need to use this unless you're in Spain, I guess. So, comer, very simple to eat. You probably already knew that. The example they give is very basic. Hoy como con mis compañeros de trabajo. Today I'm eating with my coworkers. Not to be confused. It can be confusing when you're speaking, when you're hearing people speak. That como, como. There's like 3 different comos in Spanish, all with different accents. So you have to be you have to be like listening very closely to context here. Tomar is to take or to have. Tomar often gets confused with other versions of take in Spanish. I think what it's really important to remember is that it also kind of has that to have, right? Que tomen los señores. What are the men having, right? Or like toma agua, right? To take water. You can also replace it with to have water, right? If you can replace that instance of take with to have, right? What are the men taking, right? What are they taking for their dinner? You can do that there. Does it sounds a little bit odd, but you can do it. Use tomar in that case then. Vivir is to live. It's regular, woo woo, and pretty basic. There's not much to it, right? You know how to use it. Vivimos en España desde hace 5 años. I forgot the word for 5 again, or for 5, not again, but I forgot it for a second. Right, we've been living in Spain for 5 years, very basic. This one is a cognate, woo woo, like the first one in all of these, it's a cognate to English. Necesitar, to need, very basic, right? Necesito tu ayuda, I need help, okay, very basic. Quedar, this one is also frequently forgotten. I think of all these verbs, the only one I recall really ever forgetting is quedar. It's to stay or to meet, right? Quedamos con Juan a las 8 enfrente del cine, right? We're meeting Juan in front of the movie theater at 8, right? There's also different verbs for meet, but quedar is helpful. It comes up a weird amount for some reason. I don't feel like I don't use stay or meet that much in English, but it comes up a lot in Spanish. And venir, irregular, very sad, but there's not much to it. It's to come. A lot of people get venir and salir confused. They're pretty much opposites. But yeah, make sure that you remember venir is to come, salir is to leave. So, the example they use here is Cuando vienes a visitarme. Oh, they use a reflexive here. When are you coming to visit me? Very basic example. And that's all, guys. I hope you liked the video. I hope it helped you. And you should follow us on Instagram, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and make sure to send in some more suggestions so we can get this cast project finished. See ya!